Welcome. Today we are going to look at History Paper 1. State 2 factors that contributed to the migration and settlement of the Iteso in Kenya by 1800 AD. Number 1, increase in population in the cradle land, search for pasture and water for their animals, natural disasters, for example, diseases, drought, and famine, external attacks by hostile communities such as the Turkana and the Karamojong. Question 2. State 2 ways in which Kenyan communities interacted during the pre-colonial period: trade, intermarriage, and raids. 3. Identify 3 religious practices of the Luo. They believed in a universal creator, Nyasaye. They offered sacrifices to Nyasaye. They worshipped through their ancestors. They believed in the existence of spirits, both good and bad. Priests presided over religious ceremonies. Number 4, identify one natural calamity the Maasai experienced in the second half of the 19th century. Cholera epidemic, smallpox, locust invasion, and pneumonia, or you can call it pneumonia. Question 5, identify one reason why Africans were not allowed to grow some cash crops before 1954. Number 1, Europeans wanted to continue getting cheap African labor for their farms, to avoid competition by African farmers, to control the spread of disease and pests from African farms. State 2 features of the political organizations which were formed in Kenya before 1939. They were regional in outlook, that is, they were local and tribal. They were moderate in their demands. Question 7. State 2 objectives of the Second Lancaster House Conference, that is in 1962, to draft the Independence Constitution, to sort out the existing differences between KANU and KADU. Question 8. Define human rights. These are accepted principles of fairness and justice to all human beings. Question 9. State one way in which corruption militates against national unity. Through bribery and other corrupt practices, some citizens are denied their rightful share of goods and services, leading to animosity. Question 10. Give 2 disadvantages of written constitutions. They do not change with the needs of the society. They are rarely understood due to phraseology. Amendments are slow, cumbersome, and constrictive. They are expensive to review. Question 11. State 2 types of representative democracies: parliamentary democracy, presidential democracy. Question 12. State 2 functions of the Chief Justice in Kenya: supervises the entire court system in Kenya, swears in the president and other senior government officers before they assume office, admits newly qualified advocates to the bar, lays out the procedures to be followed in handling court cases, hears the cases that are brought before the High Court or Court of Appeal. Question 13. State 2 functions of the President of Kenya: head of state and government, opens, prologues, and dissolves parliament, chairs cabinet meetings, is commander-in-chief of the armed forces, defends the constitution of the nation, protects the rights of the citizens, ensures security in the country. Question 14. Identify the 2 main types of government expenditure. There is capital expenditure, recurrent expenditure. Name one local authority that is responsible for the administration of rural areas: county council, area council. Section B, 45 marks. Question 16A. What were the results of the settlement of the Luo in Kenya during the pre-colonial period? Assimilation of some of the communities they found in the areas of settlement, for example, Abasuba. Intermarriages with their neighbors, for example, Abaluya. Neighboring communities lost some of their land to the incoming Luo. Displacement of some communities, for example, Abagusi. Occupation of fertile land influenced the Luo to adapt farming on a large scale. Cultural exchanges between the Luo and their neighbors, for example, languages and naming. Question 16b. Describe the social organization of the Luo during the pre-colonial period. The Luo were organized into clans, each with a common ancestry. Marriage between members of the same clan was prohibited. They believed in the existence of one god, Sire. They prayed to God through priests. They venerated, or rather, you can just say they worshipped ancestral spirits. They had sacred places set aside for worship. They initiated their youth into adulthood. They celebrated important occasions, for example, harvest and marriage, through drinking, eating, wrestling, and dancing. Question 17a. Give 3 reasons why the British scrambled for the control of Kenya during the pre-colonial period. To establish their control over the source of the river Nile because of their interest in Egypt. To stop the slave trade in the region. That is, the trade had been outlawed and was also no longer profitable because of the Industrial Revolution. Therefore, there was need to replace it with legitimate trade. 3. To provide protection to their missionaries who were already in the region so that they could carry out their missionary work. To establish a reliable market for their manufactured goods. To establish a reliable source for industrial raw materials for their industries in Britain. To protect strategic interest in the East, especially being able to establish their control over strategic coastal areas. Question 17b. Describe 6 agricultural changes which the British introduced in Kenya during the colonial period. They encouraged white settlers to set up plantation farms in Kenya to make the colony self-sufficient in foodstuffs and also promote export trade by exporting the agricultural products to Britain. They introduced new crops in Kenya such as tea, wheat, coffee, and pithethrum. Some of these crops became major cash crops. They introduced exotic breeds of livestock in Kenya, for example, pigs, dairy cattle, and sheep. They introduced new farming methods such as terracing of the landscape. Land consolidation services were introduced to the farmers. There was a shift in emphasis from subsistence farming to cash crop farming in some parts of Kenya. Farmers were encouraged to form cooperation to facilitate their farming activities. Question 18 here. Identify 3 independent religious movements that were established in Kenya by 1930. The Mumbo cult, that is in Luo land and Gusii land. The Luo Nomia mission, still in Luo land, and Kelume Ambani. 18b. Explain 6 causes of the rise of independent churches and schools in Kenya. They were opposed to the missionaries who refused to accommodate certain African practices. The mission education failed to prepare Africans for challenging careers. Instead, it prepared them for such lowly positions as clerks, farm workers, and catechists. Africans were discriminated against in church leadership. That is, they could not be appointed to high offices in the church. During services, Africans could not be allowed to perform such tasks as collecting of offering or conducting church services. Africans were opposed to forced labor in European farms for low wages, lack of representation in the government, land alienation, taxation, and kipande system. The missionaries expelled from their churches those Africans who refused to denounce their customs. They therefore resorted to the formation of their own churches. The children whose parents were expelled from the church were not allowed into mission schools, hence the establishment of independent schools. Question 19a. Identify three political and social organizations that were founded in the 1930s. Taita Hills Association, Kamba Members Association, Coast African Association. 19b. What role did Jomo Kenyatta play in Kenya's struggle for independence? Kenyatta joined the Kikuyu Central Association in 1927. In the same year, he became its secretary. At the same time, Kenyatta was appointed editor of the KCSE newspaper, Mwigwithania, that is a reconciler. Kenyatta's role was to campaign for the implementation of the KCA objectives, that is the Kikuyu Central Association objectives, which were attainment of self-government by Africans, an increase in African representation in the LEGCO, increased availability of land for Africans, realization of free and compulsory education for Africans, abolition of the Kipande system, improved working and housing conditions for Africans. In 1929 and 1931, he was sent to London to represent Agikuyu grievances to the British government. While there, he also demanded the return of land to other African communities who had lost the same to Europeans. Between 1931 and 1946, he lived in Europe, and while there he wrote articles critical to colonialism. The Negro Worker, a newspaper for black people in Hamburg, Germany, published his denunciation of British colonialism. The Labour Monthly of London as well carried his view. The Labour Monthly, remember it was also a newspaper, carried his view attacking the British for the gold rush in Kakamega in 1931 to 1932. Through such publications, Kenyatta became a spokesman for oppressed Africans in Kenya. Kenyatta also joined the Pan-African movement, which condemned imperialism. In this, he worked with the C.R. Jones and T. Russ Makonnen. Together with others, the International African Service Bureau was set up in 1937. Through rallies in London Hyde Park, Kenyatta attacked colonial policies in Kenya. In 1945, the Fifth Pan-African Congress was organized by Pan-Africanists in Manchester, England. Kenyatta was one of the delegates. Participants from Africa resolved to return home and lead their countries to independence. Kenyatta came back to Kenya in 1946, and in the following year, he became president of Kenya African Union, (KAU). It was the first national political party in the country and advocated for African rights. Some militant KAU members demanded for Kenya's speedy freedom and went on to form the Mau Mau movement for the purpose. Its activities led to the declaration of a state of emergency on October 20th, 1952. Kenyatta was arrested for his role in campaigning for independence. Kenyatta's imprisonment and detention, together with the repression of Mau Mau, attracted international attention. British administrative failures in Kenya were exposed. After release from detention, Kenyatta took over KANU as his president on October 28, 1961. He also joined LEGCO. In 1962, he participated in the Second Lancaster House Conference, which discussed constitutional amendments for Kenya's independence. KANU was one of the two political parties, and Kenyatta, as its leader, played a big role in the deliberations. Following KANU's victory in general elections, Kenyatta was appointed head of the internal self-government, Madaraka, on 1st June 1963. When Kenya gained independence on 12th December 1963, Kenyatta became the prime minister. 1 year later, on Kenya's attainment of full independence as a republic, Kenyatta took over leadership as the first president. Section C, 30 marks. Question 21A. State 3 ways in which one can become a Kenyan citizen: by birth, by descent, by registration, and by naturalization. 21B. Discuss the circumstances that may lead to the deprivation of Kenyan citizenship: disloyalty to the government through speech or actions. Anyone who spreads false information concerning the government or incites others against the government may be deprived of his citizenship. Participation in war against Kenya. That is, any person who assists an enemy to fight Kenya in any way shall be deprived of his citizenship. Absence from Kenya for a period of 7 years or more. So, anyone who has lived in a foreign country for more than 7 years and has not registered with the Kenyan embassy in the country of residence will be denied citizenship. If the citizenship was fraudulently obtained, for example through corruption or false information, if one is sentenced to prison in any country for more than 1 year within the first 5 years of registration or naturalization, if one's citizenship is renounced by parliament, if one is involved in trading activities with a country to which Kenya has imposed economic sanctions, if one holds dual citizenship and refuses to renounce the second country. Question 22A. Identify 5 advantages of a written constitution. They are available for reference. They enhance unity in multi-ethnic societies. They protect the rights of the people. They cannot be changed by those in authority to satisfy their whims or to satisfy their interests. They provide a legal base for newly independent nations to refer to. Question 22B. Explain the features of the Kenyan Constitution. It provides for the separation of powers in government between the executive, legislature, and the judiciary. It provides for the Bill of Rights, that is, the entitlements of every individual. It provides for the independence of the judiciary. It provides for the rule of law, that is, all legal matters are handled in accordance with the law. All citizens are governed by the same law. It can only be amended with parliamentary approval. All constitutional amendments must therefore go through Parliament. Question 23A. Identify 3 functions of the Attorney General. He or she is the chief legal advisor to the government. She is the chief state prosecutor. He prepares bills for debates in Parliament. She can file a civil suit against a person on behalf of the public. As a member of Parliament, he participates in parliamentary debates. Question 23B. Explain how the independence of the judiciary is guaranteed in Kenya. The law of the land protects the judiciary from interference by either the executive or the legislature. Judges and magistrates are protected against any form of victimization by the Judicature Act. The judges and the magistrates are not answerable to the executive or the legislature. The judges and magistrates are bound by an oath of allegiance in which they commit themselves to perform their duties without fear or favor. The salaries and allowances of judges are not subject to discussion by the government. They are fixed by statutes. The Judicial Service Commission, which manages the court system, is independent of the Public Service Commission. It is headed by the Chief Justice. The judges in Kenya enjoy security of tenature. That is, the president cannot terminate their services at will. Kindly let me know what video I can do next. Thanks a lot for subscribing and listening to me. God bless you.